here's Jen saying it's working. Let's using it. We're already live. I don't know what's happening. Here I am wanting to do a nice Facebook Live about stress, and I'm getting stressed.
Both of
because
us.
we're not able to make connections. And this is actually, in a lot of ways, Jen, I have with me Dr. Jen Caudle. I'll introduce her in a second. This is actually kind of perfect because it totally just showcases exactly what we're talking about. Is we can't always predict the way things are going to work out, and the way that we handle it and our body handles it is really important. Stephanie Erickson here, and I have with me Dr. Jen Caudle. It is such a pleasure to have her here. Let me tell you a bit about her. Okay, first of all, she's a brainiac. She graduated with honors from Princeton with her medical degree. And then she went to the UMDNJ School of Osteopathic Medicine. She's now working as a family physician. She's also an associate professor at Rowan Medical University, which is amazing, again, in the osteopathic field. And she's also a media commentator, Dr. Oz, CNN, Fox, just to name a few. Thank you, Dr. Jen, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, I think I hate to say it, but I think you're right that the way we started this program, which was kind of stressed, probably is the best way to kind of get into caregiver stress and things like that. But no, I'm really excited to be here. I know we've talked about doing a segment on this for a long time. I know you do a lot of work with caregiver stress, and so I'm really happy to be here. Thanks.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So now, stress used to be a good thing, right? Like back in the evolutionary days of when we were running around being chased by lions, stress was a good thing. And still, even today, stress can be used to help us, to motivate us, to get us through something. So it's not always bad. But I think we're at a time now when we're just going over the top with stress and pressure that we're putting on ourselves. Can you just explain a bit of how it can be beneficial? Let's start on a positive.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. That stress isn't always bad. And you're right. From an evolutionary standpoint, stress in many ways it's almost like a protector of ours in a way. And even still to this day, stress is not always bad. We think of getting stressed, sometimes stress or anxiety or things like that either helps protect us from something dangerous. It tells us something's wrong and makes us hypervigilant. Sometimes it helps us get ready for whether it's a presentation or a test or something that we're doing. Pressure, stress, anxiety, there is a place for it. And again, it's not always bad. But the question is the balance, right? And stress can turn bad. It can turn negative. It can sort of incite negative symptoms in us and really make our lives horrible. So I think the question is understanding when we're having good stress versus bad stress, and then also learning how to manage the stress that we have. Because honestly, there's no one in this world that lives without some sort of stress at some time.
Well, I think my puppy lives without stress. He seems pretty relaxed and happy. But okay, so let's talk about differentiating between the good stress and bad stress. I know for me, when I'm stressed out, really stressed out, my eye starts twitching, and I know my body is saying, hello, wake up. There's something that you're not addressing, or I get like a pain in my shoulder. So now I know I've kind of like tipped that balance. But what are the typical things that happen for people?
Yeah, so stress can really affect us in different ways. And as a family doctor,
again,
did it freeze?
Oh man!
Oh no! Okay, well wait. Okay, for anyone who's watching, please don't leave. Okay, Stephanie, can you see me?
I can see you fine. I know you can't see me, but
no, I can see you. I can see you.
Oh, really? Okay, well, it's not showing on the screen anyways. Go ahead and talk, and we don't need to see me. Tell me anyway, Jen.
Okay, but I can see you and I can hear you, so that's good. So anybody who's watching, please keep watching. This is stress. This is stress at its best. We're just trying to demonstrate what we're talking about. So physical symptoms of stress. Well, let's just talk about even how I felt in this particular moment when you said, oh no, wait, oh, are you there? Saying to myself, I think our connection is disconnecting, which is the problems we've had this morning, right? What did I feel? My heart raced just maybe a little bit faster. My breathing got a little bit faster. And I know that I became a little bit more hypervigilant, even just looking at the screen saying, oh my gosh, what should we do? I hope this is not happening. The physical manifestations of stress really range. Sometimes I have patients coming in and they say they're not sleeping at night because their mind is racing. Sometimes people, you mentioned some shoulder pain, I think neck or shoulder pain, I think you mentioned, or like an eye twitching. Yeah, I have friends actually that get eye twitching, but also like stress or feeling pain or like muscle soreness in the neck. Sometimes we carry our stress, in our shoulders and our neck. Headaches. I actually trained with a fellow, a cardiology fellow when I was in residency, who, when she got stressed, she got a little patch of eczema over her eyebrow, which was really interesting. And she said that's how she knew when things were getting to her in a way, is because this flare up of eczema would happen. Some people start to cry. They're just more tearful or more emotional when they're stressed. So the symptoms of stress can be everything from rashes, like things you can see, rashes and stuff, and eye twitching, to things you can't see, like headaches and problems sleeping, to even emotional responses, crying. Some people snap at other people, get irritable, get kind of antsy. That's why I say stress really can affect us in every single way possible.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I'm glad you brought up the, psychological impact of stress as well. And sometimes we can't see that. And I think this is a bit off, but in mental health in general, we can't see those problems. So we can't ever, I guess, underestimate what might be happening with us mentally, even if physically we're managing things, mentally things can be happening. So when we're under a tremendous amount of stress, what are some of the health problems that can come when stress is not alleviated quickly? It's ongoing and chronic.
Yeah, so stress over a long-term period of time. I mean, we know certainly things that may seem more obvious than others, such as symptoms of anxiety and depression, right? If we feel that we're under the gun, that we're stressed and that we're constantly stressed, it may lead us to these anxiety, depression type symptoms. So that's one thing that can happen. Sometimes the mood changes and stuff that we talk about, maybe it just means that we're perpetually in a bad mood. Maybe we don't necessarily feel anxious or depressed, but once again, if we're always stressed, maybe we're just really not able to cultivate relationships, spend time with others, and sort of be our freest self. But I do want to make a comment about relationships, because often with stress, we may change our behavior or our life to accommodate what we're going through. So if we're particularly stressed, we may decide to stay at home and hibernate, either to deal with whatever we're stressed about, or just because we're so stressed. We may avoid people, or maybe jump out into the world and be out all the time. We may drink more, we may eat more, we may eat less. So there are behavioral changes that can happen too. So, I think, to the short answer to your question of, how can stress affect us if we don't deal with it, is these things that we see in the short term can certainly be prolonged. But I also think that stress, the longer it goes without being addressed, continues to take a toll. The idea is we're still kind of suffering, we're still suffering all throughout. And that's why I think that even understanding what makes us stressed out and understanding how our body responds to that and our mind responds to it is really one of the best things we can ever do.
Yeah, for sure. And I like what you're saying, because like I was telling you about my eye twitch, sometimes I don't realize that things are bothering me until my eye starts twitching. And it's like my eyes like, pay attention, look, observe, things are not working out for you. And I think it's important for us to understand. And what can we do? Like when we know that we're getting to a level, let's say in work stress, let's say, and we know we have to perform, and we've got the thought behind us of, if I don't perform at work, I'm going to lose my job, then I'm going to have financial stress, and then my marriage is going to fall apart, and how am I going to, pay for braces for my kids? How do you suggest that people learn how to manage their stress when they can't necessarily remove themselves from that stressful situation?
Right. And that's a good question, because oftentimes we can't remove ourselves from the situation, right? We can't just make our work stress go home, or maybe it's home stress. Maybe it's stress with our relationship, or our marriage, or our children, or maybe it's other family members. We may not be able to wave a magic wand and make that go away. So your question is really apropos. So how do we deal with it when it can't go anywhere right then? And, again, I think it sounds silly, but I think recognizing when we're stressed is the first thing, because, and I'll use myself as an example. I'll be honest with you. When I mentioned that some people cry when they get stressed, actually, I realized that's actually what happens to me. In the last few years, I would find myself in just a random time, I might burst out into tears. And I would stop and say, why am I tearful? And I've come to recognize that for me, that's often a sign that I'm feeling very overwhelmed. It's usually an overwhelmed state. The first thing is understanding how you respond when you're stressed, so that you know you're stressed, because we can go on this way for a long time and not recognize that that patch of eczema is our sign of stress, or that our tearfulness is our sign of stress, or that your eye twitching is the sign of stress. So kind of trying to put two and two together and say, wait a minute, gosh, this happened to me last time. Last time I felt like this, that's right, I didn't sleep for 3 days, or kind of putting the pieces together and thinking critically. Once we've recognized and come to understand that, oh gosh, I think I'm overwhelmed, or I think I'm really stressed out, that's when it's important to start putting what I call building blocks in place,
Okay.
And I always say Rome was not built in a day. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that I say it, because someone said it before me, but this phrase, I did not come up with that. But the phrase that Rome wasn't built in a day really applies to this too. Changes need to be made, but they don't have to happen all at once. And I think the first thing to do is to take literally a step back and almost surveil the situation and take a look and say, okay, I am overwhelmed. I feel like I'm literally drowning. I feel like I can't handle it anymore. I feel like I can't do this anymore. Take a step back, almost like you're looking at yourself from the outside, and say, okay, what can I do right now that will help me through this? It might be calling a friend, calling a mother, calling a therapist. It might be taking a mental health day, taking a day to literally just sleep and say, I just need to step back. It may literally be sitting down with your calendar and saying, I'm overwhelmed because I have all this work to do. I will feel better if I get a schedule in place. Maybe that's you. So the idea of taking a step back is to sort of assess and say, okay, I'm going to do one thing to start on this path of trying to get myself back in control and feeling back in order, and thinking about what that thing might be just to kickstart. And I often find that that's really helpful. Sometimes it's literally just taking a break, taking a time out.
What I love about what you just said, Jen, is that you said just do one thing. And I think that's what happens when we get stressed, is that we start imagining all of the fallout for all of the decisions and all of the things that we have on our plate. And my husband uses a phrase, although he didn't invent that phrase either. If we're talking about not inventing phrases, is, how do you eat it? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Not that he eats it, but it's, this big thing. And if we look at the full elephant, it's just way too overwhelming, but we have to break it down. So I like what you're saying. And is there a point when we should say, now I need to seek help from my doctor, therapist, or should we try for a while just managing on our own?
Well, so certainly, starting to try managing on our own is a reasonable first step, but there are definitive times where we need to reach out for professional help. And that's when I say, when your life is being affected by your feelings and it's not stopping, right? So maybe you've taken that first step and you've taken a day off, you've taken a day to rest and recharge, you've gotten a calendar together, or you've reached out to a friend. If over some period of time, it's different for everyone. If you feel like, gosh, I'm so stressed, or things aren't getting better, or my life is still being negatively impacted, or I'm not able to live the life I know I can, that's when when you say, I'm not right, this is not right, I'm not sure what to do. It's a different point for everyone. And it might be sooner for some people than it is for others. It may be that you've spent a lot of time getting to this point of almost no return and didn't realize it until it was at the end, and you say, gosh, my first step actually needs to be calling a therapist, or my first step needs to be going in to see my doctor because I haven't slept in 3 months. But that's enough to go see someone. I think sometimes my patients, they feel like, well, gosh, I'm such a strong person and I've always been able to deal with everything. And, I take care of my mother and I do this, and I have kids, and I'm on the PTA, and literally you're Superwoman or you're Superman. And I've had patients come to me and say, I just don't understand. I've always been able to cope and I don't know what's wrong with me. And what I say to that is, nothing is wrong with you. It is so common. And I think, honestly, for everyone at some point in our lives, if not once, certainly more than once, to feel overwhelmed to the point of needing to reach out to someone else. think the most important thing is knowing the time to do that. And that's when we don't feel like we can live our lives the way we should. And it's not a sign of personal defeat. So many of my patients feel almost a sense of shame. Gosh, I don't know why I can't handle this, or I used to be so, I could do it in the past. It's not personal. It's not a sign of shame. So I think that's one thing I really want people to know, is that it's just like any other thing that we go through in life. Maybe our blood pressure goes through a phase where it's a little too high, or our blood sugar takes, a little roller coaster or what have you, or we need to lose a few pounds. Think about this as sort of life and the ups and downs that life offers,
Yeah, and I know you have to go soon, because I think you're teaching a class or something like that in a few minutes. But just to wrap it up, I really appreciate what you're saying, because I think in terms of stress, most of the time, it's affecting the way that we're thinking and the way that we're functioning in our life. And yes, there's a physical pain, but when it comes to that mental piece, so many people are ashamed that there's something wrong with them by not reaching out. And you're absolutely right. That's not what it's like. And if you were diagnosed with cancer, are you going to not reach out for help and just say, oh, I'll just, figure out how to handle it? No, I'm sure you would go and see an oncologist and get treatment. And this is
would you blame yourself for it? If someone got cancer, which I hope they wouldn't blame themselves for it, but would you blame yourself for getting something like that? I would hope not. And just to piggyback off of what you're saying, I hope people also wouldn't do it with going through these ups and downs in life that we're talking about too,
Exactly. So thanks, Jen, for coming on. I wish we would have had more time, but schedule and our stress of the mishaps. I still don't see actually my face, because I can see what's going to display, and it's just a blank screen. So
really, that's so interesting, because I see you, which is really amazing. I mean, okay, we're going to hope and pray that everything goes well, but just for all the viewers and listeners out there, just understand, if you are feeling stressed, you're not the only ones, because we do in this particular moment in time too. And, but if I could also just say one thing, just one last thing, and I know I'll have to go in a couple minutes, but I can't say how important the idea of self-care is. This is something that I struggle with myself. And I say this almost because I feel like I need to give myself a little pep talk and a little lecture. There's this idea, I think, in the world that we live in, we're almost rewarded for doing more. It almost feels like the more you do and the more you sacrifice and the more you give up and more you work and tweet and all this stuff, the more you get. I mean, even social media is kind of built like that, right? We're rewarded with things like likes and shares. The more we are, the bigger we are, et cetera. So I think things like that almost sets up a climate and an environment where, self-care and not working isn't necessarily even valued, maybe the way working all the time is. And I guess self-care is so important. It's hard to shut off in this world that we live in. There's almost this fear of missing out in terms of, if we shut things off, what are we going to miss? But I really, really want to stress, not only to myself, but everyone out there, this idea that, maybe just pick dinner time. Maybe say between the hours of 5 and 7, the kids, we're going to have dinner, no phones, no technology. We'll put everything on their charging docks and not going to be even near the dinner table. Or maybe, you say before you, maybe you wait until noon to open your email, if you can, right? To start dealing with that kind of stuff. There are ways to kind of minimize and put technology and other things in its place. I think protecting our personal integrity is becoming more and more important, but I also think it's becoming harder and harder to do, because now we're always reachable and technically we're always on. So I would just encourage everyone out there to be protective and to employ self-care and protect yourself. Give yourself the time you need, the space you need to relax, to recharge, to connect with other people. I think it's one of the best things we can do,
Absolutely. And we have a lot of work to go there, because even our language that we use, like entrepreneurs are like, oh, I'm grinding. Like, you're not supposed to be grinding. You're supposed to be enjoying the work that you're doing and setting limits. Or people go, oh, I'm allowing myself to take a break. You should be allowing anything. That should just be part of what you're doing. And we have so much work to do in that self-care department. Maybe we could talk about that next time. Jen, thank you so much. Let's try this again, and hopefully we'll have you on.
I know. Well, thank you for having me. And if there are any listeners or viewers out there, I know, Stephanie, I know you'd love to hear from them. I would love to hear from them too. And I always just like to, and as I mentioned in one breath, the idea of taking a break from social media, I'm also in the other breath going to mention my social media handles, which is Dr. Jen Caudle. So, make sure you reach out. I do like hearing from folks and hearing, what's working for you, because this is a great community to share. I mean, Stephanie, this is a great platform, and I appreciate you having me on. This is awesome.
My pleasure. We'll do it again, Jen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.